Hi everyone, for tonight's Nightcap and review, I'm having a soda and I will be reviewing Pride and Preston Lin by Christina Hwang Dudley. This is a book I received as an ARC from NetGalley, but of course I'm going to give my honest opinion. These are the tropes and these are the content warnings. I will say there aren't content warnings listed in the book, and having read it, I think most people would be comfortable with those being in the book, but that's just to make you aware of what you're about to read. You can judge for yourself whether or not it's the book for you. So for this book, I'm giving it 4 stars. I could not put it down. I really enjoyed it. It's a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice with a character cast of mostly Chinese Americans, and it was so well done. Everything you love from Pride and Prejudice is in this book, but elevated and modernized, and like I said, I could not put it down. So like I mentioned before, this book you're going to get a lot of references and nods to the original Pride and Prejudice, but the storyline has been updated and modernized in all the best ways. So for this book, you have Leslie, who is the middle of 3 sisters. They have been orphaned and taken in by their aunt and uncle. You have Jenny, who's the older sibling, who is studying for the MCATs. Leslie is a English major. Both of them work in the family restaurant when they're not at school. And then you have their younger sister, Jojo, who's about 15 or 16 and in high school. Now, one night when Lynn is waitressing at the family restaurant on a super busy night, being pulled in multiple directions, a very well-to-do, well-known family is seated at one of her tables, the Lin family. Now, their son, Preston Lin, is very well known. He's a star swimmer. He's going to Stanford to get his PhD, and he can basically do no wrong. So she is very nervous because he's also very attractive while she is helping their table. But again, it's a very busy night, so she's being pulled in multiple directions, and she is not able to give them her full attention. And this unfortunately leads to her serving a dish to one of the members of the table that has an ingredient that she was made aware of that person has an allergic reaction to. In the end, they are able to resolve the matter and the person is okay, but that does lead to some consequences for Leslie and eventually the restaurant as well. Now, the restaurant does suffer some consequences from the mishap, especially because Preston does take some action, which results in a loss of business towards the restaurant because it was his friend that had the allergic reaction, and he was angered by the whole situation. Now, Leslie, because of his reactions, kind of already had anger towards him, especially with how uppity he was acting and self-righteous. But when she finds out the actions that he took and how it affected the business, this increases her anger tenfold. But with the universe and lots of circumstances throwing the two of them together, a big one being her sister dating his best friend, she is working on overcoming her pride and her initial misgivings and trying to learn who the real Preston is. And once she starts to learn who he is, it makes her question everything, and it might turn some enemies into lovers. Now, what are my thoughts on this book? Well, again, I'm giving it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It was definitely Pride and Prejudice and everything you loved about that book, but modernized in all the best ways possible. Some of the things I really loved about this book is in the first book, you definitely got more of a romance vibe, but I think that's because due to it being in the time period that it was, Regency period, for women, there was a lot of focus on marriage, so there was a lot more romance. So it was marriage, marriage, marriage. In this book, because it's modernized, and I think because a lot of people in our generation don't have that much of a focus on marriage, this allowed the characters, the female characters, the sisters, to be real people. You have the eldest sister who's studying to be a doctor. You have Leslie, who's an English major. You have the younger sister who's becoming a swimming champion. They have evolved and become real people outside of just being on the marriage mark. And that just added a different depth to the story I loved. Now, that's not to say there isn't romance in this book. I'm just saying it's not romance heavy. In this book, there's a lot of tension buildup, especially as the characters start to get to know one another and unpack their feelings and recognize their feelings. That tension just grows and grows. Now, I will say this is a clean romance author, so there is no spice in this book. There is some kissing at the end, but that's it. But I didn't notice because that tension buildup was just so well done, and I really did enjoy it. Now, the next part that I'm going to comment on, I do want to say that I'm going to try and convey my thoughts as best as I can. I apologize if I misstep and misspeak. I understand I am not from this community and cannot fully understand the nuances of what is going on in the book, but I do want to bring it up because as someone who is learning and growing, I really appreciated what I read and the depth it added to this character that I feel it's worth mentioning. So with the original Pride and Prejudice, what I really loved about the Elizabeth character was her kind of odd duck feeling. You know, she's a bookworm who loves her family but doesn't quite connect with them or her peers. So it kind of left her being the odd man out. Now, that feeling was definitely in this book when it came to the Leslie character, but I think a real depth and nuance was added to it with the characters being Chinese American. This is done in instances like where she is compared to her older, beautiful sister who is studying for the MCATs, and other characters like Preston Lin, who is equally high achieving, and other characters as well. She just doesn't seem to meet the expectations of others within her community and family. Yes, she's an English major who loves what she's doing, but it seems to get thrown in her face, especially at one instance. It seems to basically be screamed in her face. You are Chinese American. You don't even speak Chinese. Why are you going to school to learn English? You should at least know that. So there are some nuances, I think, as her being a Chinese American character that you see not just in that, but in other instances where she is kind of that odd duck. So you still get that feeling like you would from the original Pride and Prejudice, but you get a real depth to it that I appreciated. In the end, I loved everything about this book. I could not put it down. It had everything I loved about the original Pride and Prejudice, but updated in all the best ways possible. Now, this book will be available March 19th. Make sure to give it a download, especially if you love the original Pride and Prejudice. I hope everyone has a good night and happy readings.